Welcome to the Octopath episode 138. Oh, hello there. This is a podcast about the Division franchise, its community, news, speculation, and updates about the game and other things around it. I am Bon Diesel. I do Division stuff such as this podcast, Twitch streams, and YouTube videos. Please take a moment to subscribe and to rate the podcast on whatever platform you are listening to it on. If you can leave a review, especially on iTunes, I would very much appreciate it. This episode, we will talk about The Division 2's future, raid, gear talk, first impressions, content updates, and more. First, I'd like to thank our Patreon supporters for this month: Hassan, Christian, Darren, Tim, PK, Ron, and Man-Made Golf. If you'd like to support this podcast and my other content, please check out patreon.com/bondiesel. Okay, so jumping straight into some Division topics. We haven't had a traditional EchoCast for a while. The last one was with Ross and Thurber. Thank you very much for checking that out and listening, and the feedback on that. It was extremely good. Rawson has already reached out to me and said that he will reach out to me again after they've begun filming, and we can talk a bit about the movie and where it shapes up and where it's at that time. So, that feedback and him wanting to do it again very much comes from everyone who listened and commented and was really cool, and I very much appreciate that. Special thanks to NGN. If you haven't checked out their lore videos and videos in general about the Division, make sure you do. He sent over a bunch of his people to check out the full podcast after he did kind of a summary of what we talked about. So very much appreciated to him and the people who follow him, as well as everyone else who checked out the video. So some of this news is going to go back pretty far because we're talking about like a month or more. So the first thing I want to talk about is I haven't done a podcast since they finally released like a statement or like a real setup to the future of the Division 2. So we know a few things. We know that Hamish is no longer with the Division. He has moved to, I believe, a whole new studio and is on a new project. So, big props to him, and really happy for him. Obviously, it's sad to see him go. He's been such a staple in the Division community, and so on and so forth. But we will, be happy for him, and maybe, just maybe, if there's ever a Division 3, maybe he comes back. But either way, much appreciation and much love to Hamish, and good luck to him. So we did find out that Yannick is now a co-creative director, along with who I believe is the head of the Ubisoft Bucharest studio. They didn't give us a ton of detail about what's going on right now, but the impression I get is that they're creating maybe kind of a small team at Massive to continue some Division 2 content, and they're going to utilize Ubisoft Bucharest, who has basically helped out with all of the big Ubisoft games in relatively recent history, and that's going to be kind of one of their sources of help to get this content done that's coming later in 2021, and I would guess in early 2022 as well. They did confirm that there is a new mode that is completely new to the franchise coming later this year, as well as other content. Until then, they are rerunning the seasons currently for people who either didn't finish them or are newer to the game and missed things that had run through already. And that's kind of all of the official info that we have. So between kind of reading the tea leaves and maybe some conversations I've had privately, um, the impression I'm getting is that the impression I get is that basically after Warlords of New York came out, uh, Ubisoft was kind of good with Division Two. I'm under the impression that Warlords was kind of a miracle that it happened in a really short time frame with not many resources, and still, I believe it's the best DLC they've had. And the impression I'm under is that it did so well that Ubisoft decided they wanted more Division Two content eventually. The problem is that the impression I'm under, and what seems apparent now, is that I think they basically cleaned house for Division 2, and there was essentially not a team left besides, I guess, maybe like a support team that was just there for bugs and fairly minor fixes and so on and so forth. So um what it seems like, and it seems obvious from some of the things happening recently, as well as this perceived delay in any new content, is that they're building a new team from scratch. um, so I don't know what that means exactly. I assume that means that right after Warlords, we have pretty good reason to believe that people like Julian Garrity and Thylander and others who have been fairly prominent in the Division community from the dev side, have probably not been on Division for a year or more, even at this point. And that they probably aren't coming back. It seems obvious that, we know Julian is, on the Star Wars project. I think it's safe to assume that people like Thylander and a bunch of the other devs we've dealt with, are on Star Wars or other projects. So it kind of seems like they're kind of scraping together a whole new team. We do know that Trick Dempsey is still on it. She's been very big in the community, especially with the seasons from year two. She was a big part in revamping those and kind of bringing them back. And I am very happy that Trick still is involved in the game, as I think her enthusiasm and enjoyment of her job has definitely shown both in her interactions with the community as well as the changes made to the game under her watch. Um, so yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. As for this new mode, what do I think it's going to be? I have no idea. The one thing I will say is that both from let's call this educated or experienced speculation. If the Division Two was basically on the brink of being kind of mothballed and no longer having content made for it, but then Warlords did really well, and someone, apparently at Ubisoft really likes the Division and thinks that it's worth continuing, they wouldn't, I don't think, take all of the resources and time it's going to take to build a new team, basically, to just put out some more seasons. I think they've even confirmed that there aren't more seasons. So while I think people should be measured in what they're going to expect, both timeline wise, I don't think we should expect anything until this fall. But especially content wise, maybe don't shoot for the moon, which I know is impossible, especially in this community. People have a tendency to make up their own expectations that are wildly impossible to meet and then get mad when they aren't met. But you know how that goes. That's fine. But I don't think that they would do this and then just fluff out some content that kind of doesn't matter. So I do think it's okay to have some hope that this will be a pretty significant amount of content. I wouldn't be surprised if it's mostly PVE and multiplayer co-op focused, but I wouldn't even be surprised if there is some significant PvP changes and stuff like that. I really don't have any reason to really believe that, but I just think that there's a good chance they're going to drop something on us that's really cool. mode wise, and then that they're going to add a bunch of stuff and update a bunch of stuff to carry the Division 2 for a couple years, for at least people to jump on and play if they want to. I've speculated pretty widely that I don't think there's going to be a Division 3 for a while. I think there will be a Division 3. I think it's way too valuable of a franchise, of an IP, both for Massive and for Ubisoft, to just completely mothball it. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's 2024, 2025 before we would see a third game. And there's a few ways that could happen. Either, the one thing to realize, and I read in some articles and heard in some interviews and so on, that the Star Wars project isn't really, there's no expectation at this point that they're going to release Star Wars and then they're going to start working on another Star Wars game. The impression I'm under is that this is a kind of a one and done situation. You see Disney slash Star Wars doing this now, since they're ending their contract with EA, their exclusivity, that they're going to bounce around to different creators and studios and publishers to make Star Wars games now. So my guess, in all honesty and clarity, is that I think that they're going to complete Star Wars. I suspect it releases in, I would love to say 2022, but it really seems like they're in the beginning stages of Star Wars. So my guess is early 2023 is when we should expect this Massive slash Ubisoft Star Wars game. And what that would mean is probably at least a decent amount of time after that of support, maybe even DLC, and then they would move on to a new project. So there's a chance that they may be able to start development on a Division 3 in late 2023, which would mean, probably 2025 for a Division 3. Now, the other factors to consider is that Massive just moved to a brand new studio. From reading David Polfeld's book and some interviews and things I've seen, it seems like right now Massive is at around 600 or 700 employees. This new Eden studio they're in, I think, is meant for 1,000 plus developers. So to me, that makes it pretty clear that they're building a third team. There's a part of me that wouldn't be surprised if this Division 2 team they're building, it will be the start of a third team in their studio. And there's always a chance that within the next year and a half, maybe late 2022, they would potentially use that team to begin work on a Division 3 before they can move a bunch of resources back over to developing a whole new game. I suspect that while I think that they wouldn't do this Division 2 content for no reason, like I suspect it will be significant. I also suspect that it may not it's not going to be huge. I'm not expecting them to work on this stuff for 2-3 years. I suspect it's a 18-month project more than likely. And so it wouldn't surprise me if they do that. Now, the alternative is they could always turn a Division 3 mainline game over to another studio. I know a lot of people are speculating Red Storm or even like Reflections or Leamington, even some of the Canadian studios and stuff. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. I find it really hard to believe that if Massive has any say in who does a Division 3, whether they would allow someone else to do it or not. But again, that kind of turns into a wait and see type of thing. I don't think they will. I think that once they finish Star Wars, it kind of seems like the Avatar team is its own deal. I don't know how many people from the division are working on Avatar, who have switched over, or who kind of, you have to consider too that just because someone's working on one game doesn't mean they don't help with another. So there's always a chance that someone who's an environmental lead on division, or was, they doesn't mean that they can't pop over and work for a few months on a different project. I suspect that they kind of work at Massive's convenience. So yeah, So that's what we know about Division Two from here on out, and then a bunch of speculation by me. So, we'll talk a bit about more of this, a bit more about that this in a moment. But the next topic is something that now feels like it was weeks ago because it was. But I made a tweet that I promise the intent wasn't exactly to be trolly or anything, but it was meant to kind of get people going a bit. And so basically, I made a tweet saying like, "Hey, I think at this point, raid exclusive gear should be in the loot pool. Um, you know, make it as challenging or not as you want to let people get it. But here I'm talking about like the Eagle Bearer, and even some of the stuff from the Iron Horse raid as well. You have to consider that the first raid is now 2 years old, or if it's not already, it's close. Um, so at some point, if people haven't done that raid by now or haven't done it enough to get that gear, they're probably not going to. And one big misconception. Well, here, I'll jump into it. So, you know, the first raid's 2 years old. The second raid's almost a year old, or it will be this summer. My suggestion is that they would add these things to like the exotic loot pool, or they could even do some quest lines, kind of like with the holster that we have, where you have to go through or even the new the chess piece that you have to do all these fairly demanding things to acquire. Um, that there should be other ways to get the raid gear at this point. Um, I expected this to bring out some passion. It brought out a lot of stubbornness and toxicity, in my opinion, as well, even though it was from a relatively small number of vocal people. Um, I never expect anyone to take an opinion or an idea of mine and just be like, that's dope. I agree completely. But I also do expect people to like actually engage and be maybe a little creative or have some give and take rather than just being, stubborn, antagonistic, and sarcastic. Um, I I just think it's interesting that there's this weird attitude about this game. This is a highly casual game. And there's absolutely ways to be like a quote unquote try hard at the game, but that requires basically setting your own goals and such. I really think that this game isn't really intended to be this like hyper challenging, hyper rough grindy game. Um, I think people need to realize that while maybe you get to play 30, 35, 40 hours a week, maybe you're a streamer or you just have a lot of free time on your hands or whatever. That's not what the average person plays. And while I don't necessarily think we should have to cater to someone who plays like an hour a month, I think that's a little silly. I do think we're rewarding people who only have 3, 4, 5 hours a week to play, and giving them opportunity to get gear that they wouldn't normally have is a good thing. For instance, this raid gear that started this whole topic, talking about how, when I brought this topic up, there was a lot of pushback of like, well, like it's not that hard to get a raid group, and it's like I agree. Well, actually, I think it is. I think it's a lot harder than people think. Not everyone has Discord. Not everyone knows, the LFG website and stuff like that. And since there's no in-game LFG, mind you, I'm not saying matchmaking, because that's a big thing. Oh no, no matchmaking. Even though I think it would work, not very well, but I think it would potentially work, especially at this point. Since there's no real in-game system to matchmake with people, that not many clans are still active. The ones that are, a lot of the people who do the raid somehow still are doing it for times that there are carry groups, and if you find one of those and you want to run it like that, that's great. But my whole point is that you've got people running these raids in like sub 20 minutes, and but I'm also told that it's the ultimate challenge and that people shouldn't be able to get the gear unless they do the challenge. And is it a challenge? Because from what I can tell, after the raids got figured out, they became fairly easy, especially for a group who knew what they were doing. So it kind of seems to me that people are pretending like the raids are still hard because they don't want other people to have the gear that they feel like they were entitled to, even though they've had that gear for multiple years, and even though that gear isn't even meta at this point. It's just like a weird gatekeeping thing to me. Um, and I don't expect everyone to agree with me, but like I said before, what happened in this conversation about this was a lot of people just saying, no, you get good, bad idea, instead of like, well, what if they did this or what if they did that? Um, it's a really good way to lose my attention completely is if I throw out an idea or an opinion and your response is just no. I I no longer care what you think. Now, if you say no, but what if they did this? What if they made it so you had to complete every legendary and heroic, and then you would get a crate with a chance at one of these items or something. I mean, make it ultra challenging. That's fine. I don't care. The big thing that annoyed me is how many of the people went on this weird tirade of being like, people like you just want everything given to them, easy, no work. And one, I specifically didn't say that. I very specifically made it clear that, like, put it behind some challenging content of some type. And then people, literally ignored that and made up their own narrative where everyone just wants everything easy, which is definitely coming from some lame political, thing that they have stuck in their brain that they can't get over and have to drag into every part of their life, where everyone but them doesn't want to work and they work really hard for everything they get. I digress. But it's just not like, what's frustrating to me in these situations is how often people, you'll make a statement or throw out an opinion, and then the only way that people can fight against your opinion, either because they're simple or whatever, is they make up their own thing that they think you said, and then they argue against that. And that definitely happened in this situation. And I found it to be pretty frustrating, and I found myself losing respect for, a handful of people who I had some respect for before. But it is what it is. So even after seeing all the pushback and all the people who were saying stuff, I still think that we should do it. I saw no compelling argument against what I stated, and I think they should put raid gear, especially the first raid. I think that gear should be in Division Two's regular loot pool in some capacity. Behind the challenges, behind whatever, I don't care. Make it hard. Don't give it to everyone for free. But I think that there should be some adjustment there because at this point, the raid content isn't compelling enough, I think, for most people to want to play it. But I think that gear is just being wasted behind that gate. The final bit of news I have here is actually today, an interview came out with Trick Dempsey with IGN India, and they were talking to Trick about, well, as pertaining to this podcast, the Division Two. There's some cool information in there about just how Division Two was designed and the missions and the scaling and stuff like that. But at the end of the article, I'll summarize that basically the Sokolov family is the antagonist at this point, or at least that's how I read it. That Shade doesn't really have any leader, and that will probably be some type of narrative moving forward, and that they don't plan any end to the story or the franchise or even the crisis that brought out the Division agents anytime soon. So I think the Sokolov thing makes sense. As far as I can tell, they are the only antagonists left. And we'll have to see what their connection is to the hunters and the remaining American government and how that's going to work with Shade, who now their quote unquote leader and Ellis is dead, contrary to the Reddit theory I saw that he was a clone, because that's how desperate people are for for hot takes now. But especially the comment about how they aren't looking for closure anytime soon on the story. Crick also made a pretty clear statement in there in that if you didn't see it happen with your own eyes as the agent, you probably shouldn't assume anything about the entire world of the division, which I thought was pretty cool. It's leaving things open as far as I can tell. Um, I also think that, I think there's a lot of doom and gloom about the Division series at this point, and for various reasons, I'm not on that train, for both reasons I can and can't say. And I really think this is a good time for patience. I think this is a good time to go hit your backlog for a few months, unless you want to play the rerun events and seasons. But I really think people need to realize just how much money this game has made Ubisoft, just how much, massive, especially, but Ubisoft seems to really care about this game, even though it doesn't always seem like Ubisoft is willing to put the oomph behind it that it could really use. I've heard some, through the grapevine, what some of the original plans for Division Two's content were, and like, oh, it's heartbreaking in a way to hear what their hope and their plans were, and then good old reality stepped in and it didn't happen. Oh man, but that's okay. No use crying over milk that was never spilled. Um, but I really think this franchise has a lot more legs than people think. I think that we're just kind of a voracious uh, community that really wants stuff now. And I do wish, that the division seemed to get the support from Ubisoft that Assassin's Creed gets, especially. But Assassin's Creed is also, between that and Rainbow Six, are their tent poles. So while I believe personally that the division could easily be a tent pole for Ubisoft if they would just let it be, that's obviously not the case right now, and we'll have to see if it ever is. Okay, so extra little segment here. I was doing a first impressions little segment on my YouTube and Twitch. The last one I did was Call of the Sea. It's kind of a puzzle first person game where a woman has gone out to this mysterious island and is trying to find her husband and his exploration party. So basically, it's a big puzzle game. It's got a really cool art style, kind of cell shady ish, kind of cartoony, but still like a realistic aesthetic. It's really cool. It's a dope game. It looks really good. It's just too slow for me. It's not really my type of game. But if you're into that kind of slow pace puzzle type of gameplay style, definitely check out Call of the Sea. Offline, I've checked out a few different games. I played Madden 21. I haven't played a Madden game in a long time, but I am a huge NFL fan. And Madden 21, it's really weird. It feels pretty good to play if you're into football and you understand football and you like football and sports games. It plays well. I wouldn't say amazing, but it's cool. I like it. People need to realize that, especially if you do a franchise where you're like the owner and the coach of a team and you make all the decisions on like players and who starts and who doesn't and who you pick up on your team and who you drop off the team and who you draft, new players and stuff like that. It's really like a big RPG because through the game you can pick and choose players to upgrade their stats and to like take a player who's not very good and boost them up and make them like a star player. It really is like an RPG, but for like sports guys and gals. So it's a fun game to play. I really enjoyed Madden. It was nice to get back to it. And it's weird, like when it's not moving, it looks really nice. Like the graphics are very good. But when it moves, like it's just wild. Like I swear some of the animations in Madden 21 were in like Madden 05. And I know that's probably not true because they've switched engines. It's obviously been like 16 years since that has come out. But like it's just weird how janky the game still is. And oh my god, there is a mode where you can make your own player and play through like high school and college and then get drafted. And so there's a bunch of these story elements where you like pick like dialogue choices and stuff, and they have these cutscenes where your design character is talking to other characters. And I get it. It's, it's a Madden game. It's meant to be seen from like kind of far away, and but it is just unbelievable how awful this game looks in this situation. And just like your created character always looks freaking weird. They just look super messed up. Their bodies are like all messed up, and their body shapes aren't right, and their faces don't look good. And then even the designed NPCs you're interacting with look terrible. It's so bizarre that they even would put this stuff in. I would rather see almost like a cartoon or even like a still cutscene around these choices with the dialogue and stuff. It just looks so awful, and you just know how expensive of a game this is and how much money they probably spend to maintain it and update it. And it's just like wild how terrible it looked. But I don't know. Don't play it for the story mode. But the franchise mode I enjoyed. They have a bunch of like arcade modes too, which I'm sure are great. I didn't really mess with them, but I was really pleasantly surprised by Madden, but also kind of disappointed. The next game I want to talk about quickly is Fallout 4. So the big thing with Fallout 4 is they put out an update to allow it to use FPS boost. So this is an Xbox feature where they can take games and without the developer doing anything, they can boost their frame rate from 30 or less up to 60 or more. It's a completely like AI, like algorithm based process they use through the Xbox. And so the game I tried it out on was Fallout 4. And Fallout 4, I played, Fallout 3, New Vegas, and then 4. 4 gets panned a lot for, taking away a lot of what people liked about the first, the two previous games. And I get it. I do, miss a lot of the more complicated systems of Fallout 3, especially New Vegas. Um, but I still like 4, and especially looking at it through new eyes. I haven't played it in probably 3 or 4, maybe even longer years. Um, and while it definitely still has the issues it has, I really got into it and I really enjoyed it. I've played this game through at least 2 or 3 times before, but I've forgotten most of the story details at this point. So it's been really fun. I'm kind of trying to do like as close to 100% run as you can. I've been doing a ton of side stuff, and once I hit the where it says like, once you do this, you'll be permanently enemies with so and so, I stop and then I move on to other stuff. So I'm trying to get everything like maxed out, and then I'll save it, and then I'll go in and maybe see a few different scenarios and how they work out. But I've honestly really enjoyed it. I'm kind of starting to get a little burned out on it, and I might finally wrap it up here soon. But it was really fun getting into that game again. And they're really, even though Fallout 4 isn't great, I know they're 76 and I know it's gotten better. I still have just seen too many people describe 76 as like trying to be 4 with multiplayer, but not nearly as good. That for the Fallout just provides something that no other game has really given me. I don't see it from Cyberpunk. I don't see it from a lot of other, RPGs. And so I've really enjoyed my time. And the FPS boost is insane. It looks so good. It plays so well. I even threw on a few mods to make the game look a little better. Um, it looks great. It's a really cool game. And the FPS boost, if it works as well on all of the titles that they put it on as it did here, that's awesome. That's a very good thing. It works excellent. Fallout 4 at 60 FPS. I don't know if my computer can even do that because it's not a very well optimized game. Um, Very impressive. Really, really enjoyed it. The next game I tried out was Octopath Traveler. This is going to be a real short review. The first sequence was, I would have to guess, 10 or 15 minutes of dialogue where I wasn't even playing the game, and I quit and deleted it. So I'm under the impression this is one of those situations where I know Octopath Traveler is an extremely good game, a JRPG that so many people love and adore and are so excited that it's coming to consoles. Nope, not for me. I'm good. Never want to play it again. That is not my style. I'm a big dumb oaf caveman who just can't be that patient. Maybe one day, but probably not. So there's my big dumb man review. And then the final thing is Spiritfarer. So I started playing this a couple nights ago. It's one of those things where like I can tell if I can stick with it, I'll really enjoy it. But I did get stuck somewhere, and I looked up a guide only to find out that I thought maybe uh, you would interact with like maybe 5 or 6 characters in this game to complete the game and finish it. When I saw that there's like 15 or more, in the way that the game is proceeding, I'm good. I'm probably not gonna finish it. I like it. So basically, you are the person who is going into this kind of afterlife world. You're finding spirits. You're fulfilling a bunch of tasks they want, and then you get to shepherd them to the next stage of their afterlife. And it's the impression I've gotten is that these spirits are all connected to you in some capacity. Your character was alive at one point and died, and now they're tasked with taking these other souls and allowing them to move on to the next stage of the afterlife. And you can definitely tell there's some deeper connections. I haven't looked too deep into spoilers and stuff. I don't want to completely ruin it for myself if I want to finish it. Um, it's really cool. It's beautiful. It's just I've hit a point in it where it feels a little repetitive and it feels a little grindy when it comes to collecting resources to continue on in the game. So I don't know. I highly suggest Spiritfarer, but I don't even know if I'm gonna finish it. As for some listener questions this week, I had one from Jack Bonnie underscore BTSU on Twitter saying, "What happened to Jack Bonnie?" And I have no idea. I even tried to do some research on my own to see if anyone else had found anything. And it kind of seems like Jack Bonnie, who was a BTSU operative with Schaefer and all of the other ones, just kind of fell off the face of the earth. So I think that there's always a chance they may bring back Jack Bonnie as like a new leader to replace Schaefer since we've captured Schaefer. But yeah, we'll have to see. So I don't know. And then 901 Master Prime on Twitter asked a couple questions. Thoughts on Halo Infinite and Cyberpunk 2077. With Halo, I've been keeping up with their monthly updates. Their most recent one was with the sound engineers, both the in-game sounds and the soundtrack. The things that they're doing with the end game seem really, really, really dope, and it's really exciting. I can't wait to see that. The soundtrack they posted a couple samples of the soundtrack, and it just it like had me like tingling. It was awesome. I'm very excited for Halo Infinite. I know it's caught a lot of flack for being delayed for like basically a whole year and stuff, but I don't care. I think it's shaping up to be really, really good. It looks like it's going to be like an open world Halo, which could be good or bad, but I've got high hopes. I'm ecstatic. I really can't wait for Infinite. I'm a little nervous because it really needs to be good. Um, they need to do a good job with it. It has to do well for Xbox. So that there's a little anxiety there as someone who I consider myself an Xbox fan. As for Cyberpunk 2077, I mean, I saw this hype for this 1.2 update, and it just one, it looks like it broke things again. But things like I know it's nitpicky, but like this police thing, where like before that game came out, they were really pushing this idea of this like living open world, blah blah blah, and they have this issue, or they had this issue, where like there's supposed to be some like system with the police where it was like kind of like Grand Theft Auto but deeper, more to it. And instead, they just had this system where if you did something bad, the police would just pop up behind you, but then they like wouldn't chase you. There was like no actual repercussions to doing bad things. Um, and so one of the things that they were like, we fixed that. The police system is better now. Literally, all that happens is they spawn like 10 meters further away. So, I don't know, man. The thing is for me is that my hate for Cyberpunk, or the hate I express on it, has nothing to do with the release bugs and stuff. Like I like the Division, so I have no right in the world to shit on a game for being buggy, right? My problem with the game is that it just seems like it's as shallow as a puddle. It seems like the characters I've watched, I think 3 playthroughs of it now, and all the different endings. And like it has cool characters. It has neat interactions and like it has okay missions. I think most of the missions seem pretty generic to me, but like it has a decent like mainline story, and then beyond that there's just nothing there. Like the game would have almost been better off being in a more like handheld single player experience where it would like hold your hand through it and it would kind of force you down a path where the biggest issue with this game is almost the fact that outside of the main storyline and some side storylines, it's just shallow. There's just nothing to it. It's a very simplistic game and a very simplistic world. Um, and that would be fine if they hadn't have been so up their own butt and patting themselves on the back for the last 5 6 years about how this is going to be like a revolutionary game. And there's nothing about Cyberpunk that's revolutionary. It doesn't do anything better than any other game. That if there's a feature you like about Cyberpunk, there's another game that does it just as well, if not better. There's a lot of Cyberpunk that it does worse than GTA 5 that came out on the 360 and PS3. You know, it's I think maybe it's a comeback to reality to the surface of the earth for Cyberpunk and for CDPR, where I think a lot of people have been heralding them as like, oh yeah, CDPR and Rockstar and all these independent studios and publishers, like, yeah, like they know what they're doing, and I think that CDPR has been removed from that list because a lot of people really liked Witcher 3, and now maybe that game was more of a outside, uh, maybe a an exception to their rule, maybe. I think Cyberpunk will get better. I know there's a lot of people who like it already. I think there's a lot of people who genuinely like it and understand its issues, but still like it. I also think there's a bunch of people who can't or refuse to admit that they kind of got screwed and that that game wasn't nearly what it should have been. But it's hard to judge that from an outside perspective. So I don't plan on playing Cyberpunk anytime soon. I've seen so much of it that I know people. "Oh, it's always better when you get to play yourself." Like I don't care. Maybe one day I might check it out one day. The second part of Master Prime's question is: do you think Red Storm is working on Division 2 content? This likely stems from a listing they had on their career page at Red Storm that was changed pretty quickly. Listing asking for a lead world designer, I think, for specifically said Division 2. Now it's been switched to their next AAA game. That job listing to me looked 100% like a copy and paste job, and someone forgot to change the game. It seems like Red Storm is working on something. There's a bunch of job listings they have, you know, saying that they're hiring for their next AAA game. Um, it's hard to tell what it is. Even if people knew, they couldn't say it anyways. So I don't think Red Storm's working on Division 2. I could be wrong. They might be. There's definitely a small chance that there could be like a small team at Red Storm who has been recruited to help out Yannick and Ubisoft Bucharest. And, there's definitely a chance that Red Storm and a bunch of the other support studios for Division 2 have maybe been corralled back in to say, hey, can you give us a team of 5 to 10 people from your studio to work on this part of what we're doing for Division 2? It's possible, but I doubt it. I think that job listing very much looked like a copy paste job that someone forgot to change a detail in. So maybe I'm wrong. Time will tell. Okay, so with the final part here with some content updates, as you may have seen on Twitter, I've tried to make it fairly out there that I have decided to kind of scale back a little bit with content creation. Especially streams. I had kind of this thing, and I haven't really held very well to it in like over a year at this point, where I really wanted to try to stream like 3 or 4 times a week consistently. But between wanting to spend time with my family, having other obligations, not really having much motivation, and honestly not really wanting to play the Division right now, which is the main game people actually show up to watch, I just don't want to set the wrong expectations for people. So moving forward, I'm retaining the ability to podcast and to stream, with some downgrades included, which you may notice in my voice already. Um, so I can still do everything I was doing before. I just don't want to set expectations at this point. So the one expectation I am willing to set is I want to try to do an echo cast at least once a month, but probably longer. It wouldn't, or more often, especially as more news about this Division 2 Year 3 comes out. Once the content comes out, I'll definitely do some more streams and some more more podcasts more often. But I really just kind of want to pull back a lot of expectations and stuff. I have felt so guilty over the last few months and really the last 2 years almost, and people subscribing to my Twitch channel and doing other things to support me, and me not feeling like I'm earning it fully. Um, and so for me, nothing's really going to change that much. I'm still going to just stream when I can or when I want to. I'm still going to make the podcast whenever it seems like it's worth making. But I definitely have basically tried to strip out any level of expectation or anticipation at this point, because I just, my priorities need to be more on my health and spending time with my family and taking care of my home and my job and stuff, and maybe reallocating or reprioritizing a bit. But I do still want to do stuff, so I'll still jump on for streams here and there. What's happened so far is I've sold my Audio Technica and my Audio Technica mic and my Rode mic arm. I'm now using my LG Pro headset mic. So if you notice a difference in the voice quality, that's why. I hope it's acceptable. If it's not, I will. There's Fifine and a few other brands of like $35 mics, which really aren't that bad, especially if you tune them well. I may end up reinvesting in a fairly cheap mic. The other big change I'm making is I have a AverMedia Live Gamer 4K capture card in my PC, which is just huge overkill. There was a time where I wanted to capture 4K footage and make like Division 2 videos and stuff, and that ship has sailed. I don't want to do that. So I'm actually selling that card and buying one that's a lot cheaper that will do 1080p capture, but will pass through 4K. So it'll still do what I need it to for my personal setup. And then beyond that, that's kind of where I'm at. So the stream can still happen. It just, I don't really want to set expectations with it. The podcast will still happen fairly regularly. But I'm definitely trying to, like I said before, kind of reprioritize. I hope that you guys can respect that. If you guys still want to support via Patreon or however else, I really do appreciate it, and I will try to still fulfill the things that I feel like are expected there. But, I understand either way, basically. And there we go. Episode 138. It's a wrap. I am Bon Diesel on Twitch, where I'll stream here and there. You can check out my Twitter at Bon Diesel or at the EchoCast if you only want Division info. If you want some cool EchoCast or Bon Diesel merch, check out streamlabs.com/Bon Diesel. That's all I have. So until next time.